Hello, and welcome to this Heroes of Blackreach campaign series. Today, we'll be doing scenario number 6, Face Your Fate. This is the battle grid for this scenario. The Ultramarines will be deploying off the board on the left hand side. The Orks will be deploying in this area here, on the right hand side. So let's have a look at the army for the Ultramarines. The Ultramarines have chosen to bring along Sergeant Voralainus' tactical squad, and they also then have 300 points to spend on other units and upgrades. So let's have a look at the army in more detail. So starting with Sergeant Voralainus' tactical squad, elected to spend an extra 10 points on a heavy weapon upgrade. So that means that one of the tactical units is replaced with a las cannon. Next, for 80 points, I've added the Razorback. The Razorback is a stronger, more resilient transport than the Rhino, and it also has more firepower. And after what happened in the last scenario, I think the Ultramarines need as much protection as they can get as they move across the battle grid. Then, for 190 points, bringing along Sergeant Ixion's Assault Squad. And for 10 points, to swap out one of the Assault Squads for an Eviscerator and another unit for the Flamer. So the Eviscerator is extremely good in assault, whereas the Flamer is excellent at suppressing troops. All of the troops in Sergeant Ixion's squad have jump packs, which means they have the ability to fly and they can move over terrain and through enemy zones of control without penalty. So this will make this unit extremely flexible and very strong. There are 4 stars shown on the recruitment tiles, and therefore the Ultramarines will start the game with 4 order tokens. In terms of the thinking for this army, the Razorback will be used to move rapidly across the board. It only has a transport capacity of 5 though, so it won't be able to fit the whole of Sergeant Voralainus' tactical squad in. So the tactical unit will probably remain outside and the other units will get transported in the Razorback. Next, Sergeant Ixion's squad need to remove as many of the Orks as possible to clear the way for the Razorback. Then once they get inside the Orks deployment zone, do as much damage as they can and eliminate the Ork warboss as fast as possible. Let's look at the Ork army. So this is the army for the Orks. They have to bring along the warboss, and then there's 350 points to spend on upgrades and other units. Starting with the Ork warboss, he is an extremely strong Ork. So he has 7 health and is really lethal in assault. He is going to be difficult for the Ultramarines to bring down. So the Orks for 35 points have added a killer can. The killer can is very good against all different types of units, both infantry and vehicles. So if anything's going to bring down that Razorback, Killer Can is a good candidate. Next, for 20 points, added an extra custom force field. This is extra protection for the warboss. So not only does he have a 4+ save if he has a card with a yellow symbol on it, but also he gets a free 4+ save regardless. So that gives him extreme survivability as well as his strength. He's going to be difficult to take down. Next, for 105 points, a battle wagon has been added, and for 10 more points, extra armor. Next, the Green Raiders for 80 points, that's 4 more sluggers, and for another 35 points, a rocket launcher. Again, that might be useful for bringing down that Razorback. Finally, the boss for 50 points, and a boss token for 15 points. Giving an extra order for the Orks. So in total, the Orks have 4 order stars, giving them 4 order tokens for the game. Now we've seen both of the armies, let's move on to deployment. And this is what the deployment looks like for the Orks. So the battle wagon has been deployed into the scrapyard, and inside the battle wagon is the war boss and a unit of sluggers. At the bottom of the board is a unit of sluggers. Further up there is a killer can, and next to the killer can is the boss. Then hiding in the rocks at the top there's a rocket launcher unit and 2 units of sluggers. Let's move into turn 1. Ultramarines have the initiative. So this is how the Ultramarines have placed their order tokens. 1 on Sergeant Ixion, 1 on the Assault Squad, 1 on the Flamer, and then 1 on the Razorback. And this is how the Orks have placed their order tokens. 1 on the Sluggers unit, 1 on the Battle Wagon, and 1 on the 2 Sluggers units at the top. Here we are at the end of the first activation phase. The Ultramarines had the initiative and they acted first. So 3 of the Assault Squad have moved up into the ruins. 2 of them used a +1 bonus on their cards to gain a movement advantage. And the Razorback moved up as well into that position in the building. The Orks activated. 2 of them moved into the building at the top, the ruined building, and the one here moved into the rocks, number 3. Finally, number 4, the battle wagon fired up and over and fired at Sergeant Ixion, but unfortunately missed. The end of the supply phase, and the Ultramarines have moved the Eviscerator up to here, and also the Tactical Squad have come on to this position here. For the Orks, the Killer Can has moved up behind these rocks, and the rocket launcher has moved across to get a firing line down on that right hand side. So this is the way things look at the end of the supply phase. The end of the orders phase for turn 2. So the Orks have the initiative. They've placed an order token on the battle wagon, 1 on the killer can, 1 on the sluggers, and 1 on the rocket launcher. And the Ultramarines, 1 has been placed on the Eviscerator, 1 on this tactical squad, 1 on this assault squad, and at the top of the board, 1 on the Flamer squad. First to activate for the Orks is the battle wagon, firing up and over at Sergeant Ixion again. But this time the weapon scatters and falls behind Sergeant Ixion, hitting the barricades but doing no damage to the Ultramarine. First activation for the Ultramarines, and the Eviscerator has moved from here across into these rocks here. Second activation for the Orks is this Sluggers unit, but they don't have line of sight to anyone, nobody is in range, so they do nothing. Second activation for the Ultramarines is this Assault Squad, which moves forward into this position here behind the rock. So it's safe from this Killer Can unit because the Killer Can cannot come through the rocks and has no line of sight. Third activation for the Orks is the rocket launcher. He only has range 6 though on his rocket launcher, and nothing is in range, so he doesn't do anything. He just waits for the Ultramarines to get closer. Third activation for the Ultramarines, this Flamer unit comes across into the corner of this ruined building. Fourth activation for the Orks, and the Killer Can that was here has moved across, possibly trying to block this way from the Razorback a little bit. Fourth order for the Ultramarines, and the tactical squad that was here has moved across into these ruins. So here's how things look at the end of the activation phase. Ultramarines picking their way through the rocks and the damaged buildings, trying to avoid giving the Orks any lines of fire until they're close enough themselves to assault and charge. The end of the supply phase, and the Orks that were here have pulled back a little bit, keeping themselves away from these Ultramarines that are moving forward. The Ork that was here has pulled up into this position, and then for the Ultramarines, the Razorback that was here has come along this corridor here, and Sergeant Ixion has moved across into this location. So this is how things look at the end of the supply phase. Into turn 3, and the Ultramarines have the initiative. At the end of the orders phase, the Ultramarines placed one order onto the Razorback, one order onto the Flamer Squad. There's an order for the las cannon and the plasma gun that are inside the Razorback. Then the Orks placed their orders, one here on the battle wagon, one on the killer can, one on the sluggers, and one on this rocket launcher. The Ultramarines, though, played communication scrambled to remove an order from the Orks. And this order has been removed. First activation for the Ultramarines, and they activate the Razorback. It moves forward 1 square, and at that point the Orks play bogged down, which means it's stopped and moves no further, and also gains a suppression marker. The unit can still fire though, so it chooses to fire with its primary weapon at this slugger unit. The Razorback has twin-linked heavy bolters, which means that you roll 2 dice and pick the higher when taking a firing action. So the Razorback needs to roll a 4 or more in order to hit the sluggers. And this is the roll. So that means this slugger unit has been hit. Considers firing with the secondary weapon, but the suppressed marker means that really unable to hit anything. So the first activation for the Orks has been removed. So moving on to the second activation for the Ultramarines, and that's the las cannon that's sitting inside the Razorback. Firing at the rocket launcher, this is the roll, and that's sufficient to damage the rocket launchers. Second activation for the Orks, the killer can that was here moves round, and using this card for the +1 movement bonus, gets into assault with the Razorback. That's the result of the dice roll, which means that it's a victory for the killer can. So the killer can rolls to see where the damage is. Rolls a 4, which means that the Razorback takes the 3-4 damage marker and then takes 2 more suppression markers. Third activation for the Ultramarines. The plasma gun comes out of the Rhino. As he comes out, he takes a shot at this slugger's unit, but doesn't do any damage, and then runs into assault this rocket launcher. That's the dice roll, which means that the rocket launcher is removed and the plasma gun moves into the rocks. Third activation for the Orks is the battle wagon, choosing to fire the template here. However, it's scattered and hit the killer can. Great aiming by the Orks. However, a 3 was rolled, which is not enough to damage the killer can. Fourth and final activation for the Orks, and the flamer unit comes into this position here, and a medium flamer template flames across the sluggers and the killer can. The flamer rolls a 4 against the killer can, which washes over him without any damage, and then against the sluggers rolls a 2, which also the sluggers duck down and manage to avoid the flames washing over them in the ruined building. However, both take a suppression marker. Finally, the flamer completes his movement and moves into cover. Fourth and final activation for the Orks. The Sluggers units that are here decide it's probably safest just to stay where they are. So that's the end of the activation phase. The end of the supply phase. The Ultramarine assault unit that was here has moved across to here. The Eviscerators come across behind these rocks. Tactical squad has moved up as well. And in the upper part of the board, Sergeant Ixion has moved across, and this Ork unit has pulled back. So at the end of turn 3, the Ultramarines are bogged down in the centre. They're Razorback, unable to come through and take on the battle wagon. The assault squads are still moving across the board though, and creeping ever closer to the Ork warboss. With the Orks scattered across the board, what can they do to stop the Ultramarines? Let's move on to turn 4. Turn 4, it's the end of the orders phase. The Orks had the initiative and placed their order tokens first. They placed one on the Sluggers unit, one on the boss, one on the battle wagon, and one on the killer can. Next, the Ultramarines placed their order tokens, one on the tactical squad, one on the flamer, one on the las cannon that's inside the Razorback, and also one on this assault unit at the bottom. The Ultramarines have just played communication scrambled, which means the Orks lose an order token. The Ultramarines take an order token from the killer can. First activation for the Orks was the killer can, so they'd lost that order. So moving on to the first order for the Ultramarines. The assault unit that was here moved across. When it reached this point, it did suppressing fire on the move at this Sluggers unit. Rolled a 5, which is enough to give the Sluggers unit a suppression marker. Finally finished its move into this square. Second activation for the Orks. The boss that was here has come across into assault against the assault marines. So the Orks have played return to sender, but for the +1 assault, meaning they're just 1 point behind in assault against the Ultramarines. That's the dice roll, which means it's a draw. So the boss returns to his square. Second activation for the Ultramarines, and it's the las cannon inside the Razorback. Firing at the killer can. Needs to roll a 3 or more to damage the killer can, and roll a 5, which means the killer can is destroyed. Third activation for the Orks, and the Sluggers unit that was here has just moved across 1 square. The suppression marker means he only has a move of 1. So it looks like he's moving closer to the boss, maybe to support in another turn. Third activation for the Ultramarines, this tactical unit, firing across at these Sluggers, deciding to go for the hit rather than suppressing fire. Also choosing to play burst into action, but for the +1 to the dice roll. Needs to get a 4 in total, but unfortunately rolled a 2. So it's not enough to damage the Sluggers. Fourth activation for the Orks, and it's the battle wagon, using its big killer cannon again, firing the B template over at the Eviscerators. First time, missed, but had a second chance, re-rolled, and hit. Then it's a certain hit against the Eviscerators. They're not in cover, so it just needs a 1 in order to hit the Eviscerators. And so that Eviscerator unit is damaged. Fourth and final activation, the Ultramarines. The assault unit with the flamer coming across and putting the flamer into the 2 Sluggers units. So against the first Slugger, rolls a 2. So firing on the move means that he's doing a total of 4, but he's in the same terrain as this unit, so there's no terrain bonus for him. So he is removed. Rolls a 4 for the second one, which means that he is damaged, and he also takes a suppression token. The Ultramarine then continues his assault, moving forward into the sluggers. Then this is the result of the die roll. Great roll from the Orks, but that 6 from the Ultramarines is enough to eliminate that slugger unit. The end of the supply phase. None of the Orks have moved in the supply phase, but the Ultramarine Sergeant Vorlanus has come out of the Razorback round and into the rocks. And Sergeant Ixion has come across down into this position right next to the Ork Warboss. The Ultramarines have been carefully and methodically moving through the rocks, taking cover and tightening the noose on the Ork Warboss. But with only 4 turns to go, will they be able to crack open the battle wagon and drag out the Warboss? Or is this too little too late? Turn 5, and the Ultramarines have the initiative. They're given order tokens, 1 to the Razorback, 1 to the Flamer unit, 1 to the Eviscerator, and 1 to the Assault unit at the bottom here. They've also played Tactician to gain an extra order, so another order has been given to Sergeant Ixion. The Orks, 1 order to the Battle Wagon, 1 to the Sluggers, 1 to the Boss, and 1 to the Warboss. First activation, and the Orks take the initiative away from the Ultramarines for this first activation. And the first thing to activate is the Battle Wagon. So it fires over and up towards the Eviscerator, trying to finish it off, but it scatters. Next, firing at Sergeant Ixion, doing suppressing fire, rolls a 6, which means Sergeant Ixion takes a suppression marker. First activation for the Ultramarines is Sergeant Ixion. He just takes a single move across. So because of that suppressed marker, attacking the battle wagon in close assault would be unwise, so he's choosing just to back off for the moment. Second activation for the Ultramarines, the assault unit that was here has moved across and into close assault with a battle wagon. On the way past, he did a suppressing fire shot against the boss. Rolled a 6, which means the boss takes a suppression token. Assault unit now attacking the battle wagon. So the battle wagon has no assault capability, so will only roll 1 die. The Ultramarines, though, will roll 2 dice. They're also attacking the rear of the battle wagon, so will gain an extra +2 bonus. However, the Orks chose to use 2 of their extra armor tokens. So that means that the Ork battle wagon is +1 ahead in the assault before the dice are thrown. This is the result of the dice throw, which means a victory for the Ultramarines. The Ultramarines then rolled a 1, which means the battle wagon takes a damage token and is immobilized. Ork's second activation, and it's the turn of the boss to try to assault the Ultramarine assault unit. Ork plays the Go 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 card for its +1 bonus in assault. Also uses this extra unit of sluggers to help in the assault. So that gives the Orks a +2 bonus in the assault over the Ultramarines. However, that boss has the suppression token. So let's see how the dice look. This is the dice roll. And so it's a victory for the Orks. So the Ultramarine assault unit will be pushed back. The Ultramarines choose to play opportunistic fire for the saving throw bonus. And the Ultramarines roll a 5, which means that the assault unit is pushed back but is not damaged. Third activation for the Ultramarines, and the Flamer unit that was up here has come across, declaring an assault against the battle wagon. However, choosing to fire on the move and use the Flamer doesn't do a hit to the boss or to the battle wagon, but does add a suppression token to both due to the ability on that medium template. So moving into the assault, Flamer unit attacking the rear of the battle wagon. So the battle wagon adds +1 armor, the last +1 armor. So that brings it up to a total of 4. The Flamer unit has +2 and gains an extra 2 for assaulting the rear of the battle wagon, bringing it up to 4. This is the dice roll. However, the suppression marker means that that becomes a 2, meaning a victory for the Flamer unit. So the battle wagon is damaged and the Ultramarines roll a 6, which means that battle wagon is destroyed. And this is how things look after the Orks clamber out of the wreckage. Slugger's unit has departed here and the war boss has come out here, both forced to take suppression markers. Third activation for the Orks is this unit, but it's already activated when it helped the boss in close assault. Fourth activation for the Ultramarines, and the Razorback has moved round into this position, firing with the primary weapon against the war boss, but doing no damage. Firing with the secondary weapon against the Sluggers, but doing no damage. Fourth activation for the Orks, the war boss can't really move very far because of the suppression token, so instead chooses to just turn and fire at the Flamer unit. The Flamer unit is not in cover. The Ork war boss rolls a 4, which is enough to damage the Flamer unit. Ultramarines choose to use Emperor Protects, but for the saving throw bonus. But the Ultramarines roll a 1, which means the Flamer unit is damaged. Final activation for the Ultramarines. The Eviscerator, moving from the bottom left corner of the screen over towards the war boss and into close assault. This is the result of the dice roll, which means that the war boss needs that to go down to a 4 because of his suppression marker, and it's therefore a draw. So the Eviscerator moves back. However, because of his ability, that the war boss takes a second suppression token. This is how things look at the end of the supply phase. The tactical squad has moved across on the left-hand side. Then the 3 units at the top. The las cannon has come out of the Razorback. Plasma gun moved across to the right. And Sergeant Vorolanus has taken up position in those rocks. The only Ork unit that could move has chosen to remain stationary. So the noose is definitely closing on the war boss now, surrounded by Ultramarines, with only a few Orks to defend him. How will he survive for the next 3 turns? Or is it all over for the Orks? Let's find out. Turn 6, and the Orks have the initiative. They've given tokens to the boss, the Sluggers, and the war boss. The Ultramarines then place their tokens on the Flamer, the Eviscerator, the Razorback, and the las cannon. The Orks then played Communication Scrambled to remove an order token and removed it from the Flamer. First to activate for the Orks is this unit of Sluggers that moves into close assault with the Flamer unit. The Orks have the advantage in assault. This is the dice roll, which means that it's a draw. First activation for the Ultramarines, but the token was removed from this Flamer unit. Second activation for the Orks, and the boss charges into assault against the Flamer. Before the dice are rolled, the boss has a +1 advantage in the assault, but also has that suppression token. This is the result of the dice, which means it's a victory for the Ultramarine unit, which pushes back the Orks. Second activation for the Ultramarines, and the Eviscerator is charging in to assault the War Boss. The Ultramarines play Vengeful Fury for the +3 in assault. The Orks play Repairs for the +1 to their dice roll. This is the result of the dice roll. So the Ultramarines have 5 +3 for the dice and 3 for the card, which gives them a total of 11. The Orks have 6 +6 for the dice, -2 for the suppression marker, and +1 for the card, which is also 11, which makes it a draw. However, the Eviscerator has the terrifying power, which means that he gets to place a suppression marker on the Ork War Boss. Next, the Ultramarines play Confusion. If the unit that received the suppress marker has an order token, the unit loses it. They remove the order token from the Ork War Boss. Third activation for the Orks, and the unit that was here has moved in to assault the las cannon. The Orks, realizing that the las cannon still has to activate and has line of sight to the War Boss, means those sluggers have charged in to try and do some damage and block the las cannon. So the las cannon has no assault capability, but it does have +3 against infantry and is in cover for +2, giving it 5 and 1 dice. The sluggers have 4 and they will roll 2 dice. This is the result of the dice roll. So that's a victory for the Ultramarine unit. Third activation for the Ultramarines is the las cannon. With the sluggers blocking the way and no ability to fire on the move, the las cannon instead is targeting the sluggers. Rolls a 2, which means the sluggers unit takes a hit and is eliminated. That was the third slugger unit to be removed, which means that at the start of the next turn, the Orks will have 1 fewer order token. The Orks had their 4th activation removed. It was the one that was on the War Boss. So moving on to the Ultramarines, 4th activation. So the Razorback is going to put all of its shots into the War Boss. So starting with the primary weapon, it's twin linked, so rolling 2 dice and pick the highest. This is the result of the dice roll. So that's a hit on the War Boss. The Orks play Just to Graze, but for the saving throw bonus. The Ork War Boss has a 4+ saving throw. This is the result of his dice roll. So next, he has his custom force field, also a 4+ dice roll. This is the result of that roll. So the Ork War Boss takes a hit and is damaged. Next, the Razorback fires its secondary weapon at the Ork War Boss. This is the result of the dice roll. And this time that's not sufficient to damage the War Boss. This is how things look at the end of the supply phase of turn 6. So some of the Ultramarines have moved around here. And they've also been moving over here. So closing the noose on the Ork War Boss. None of the Orks have moved. So now, as we're about to go into turn 7, the Ork War Boss is damaged, standing beside the wreck of his battle wagon and surrounded by Ultramarines. What chance do the Orks have to survive for 2 more turns? Let's see if they can do it and move on to turn 7. Here we are at the start of turn 7, and the Ultramarines have the initiative. They place their tokens down first, placing 1 on the Flamer, 1 on the Eviscerator, 1 on the Razorback, and 1 on the Las Cannon. Next, the Orks place their tokens. Remember, they have 1 fewer than before because they've lost 3 Sluggers. They've placed 1 on the Sluggers unit, 1 on the Boss, and 1 on the War Boss. Next, played Courage to remove a suppress marker from one of their units, and they took it from the War Boss. Next, they played Blessed by Mork or Gork, and that means they can flip over a damaged infantry unit back to its unharmed side. So they flip the War Boss back to be unharmed. Next, the Orks played Communication Scrambled to remove an order token from the enemy. And they removed the order token from the Flamer. So now as we go into turn 7, the Ork War Boss is back to full health, and the Ultramarines have lost an order token. Will this mean the Orks can survive? First activation for the Ultramarines has been removed. So it's the first activation for the Orks. So the Sluggers unit charges into assault with the Ultramarine Flamer unit. The Orks have a slight advantage in assault. The Ultramarines are playing repairs, but for the +1 to their dice roll. This is the result of the dice roll. Fantastic roll for the Orks, which means that Flamer unit is going to be pushed back. The Ultramarines play, it bounced right off, but for the saving throw bonus. However, the Ultramarines rolled a 2, which means the Flamer unit is destroyed. Second activation for the Ultramarines, and it's the Eviscerator, moving into close assault with the War Boss. Again, the Eviscerator has 5 in attack, and the War Boss has 6. Neither player plays any cards. This is the result of the dice roll, which means it's a victory for the Ork War Boss. The Ultramarines, unable to save this unit, it gets removed. However, the Eviscerator had the tearing ability, which means the Ork War Boss takes a suppression marker. Second activation for the Orks, and it's the War Boss. He decides to move down to get some cover between him and the remaining 2 units that still have to activate from the Ultramarines. Third activation for the Ultramarines, and it's the Las Cannon, firing down at the Ork War Boss. This is the result of the dice roll, which means that the Las Cannon misses the Ork War Boss. Third activation for the Orks, and it's the turn of the Ork Boss, and he just simply moved across into this position here. Fourth activation for the Ultramarines, and it's the Razorback, choosing to fire at the Ork War Boss. Starting with a primary weapon, twin linked, so roll 2 dice and pick the higher. This is the result of the dice roll. So that's not enough to damage the Ork War Boss. And his secondary weapon is too weak to be able to damage the Ork War Boss. The end of the activation phase, and the Orks choose to play Ready to remove an activated marker or an order token from one of their units, and it can then act again in the supply phase. The Orks choose to remove the order token from the Ork War Boss. At the end of the supply phase for turn 7, a lot of the Ultramarines have moved round. 2 have come down here, so the assault unit that was here has come across. Sergeant Ixion has also flown down here, realising that the Ork War Boss can move into this spot here. So again, the Ultramarines have the Ork War Boss surrounded, but he's still undamaged, and there's only 1 more turn left to kill him. Can the Ultramarines do it? into the final turn, and the Orks have the initiative. The Orks place their order tokens on their 3 remaining units. The Ultramarines choosing to place theirs on the 4 units surrounding. Next, the Ultramarines play initiative in order to steal the initiative from the enemy. But the Orks reply with no. But the Ultramarines reply back with no to the no, which means the Ultramarines have the initiative. First activation for the Ultramarines is the plasma gun, doing suppressing fire at the Ork warboss. So doing suppressing fire, that means he has a strength of 6. The Ork warboss has a strength of 7, plus this +1 gives him a strength of 8. This is the result of the dice roll, which means the Ultramarines fail to do suppressing fire to the Ork warboss. First activation for the Orks is the boss. He chooses to fire at the plasma gun, needs to roll a 4 or more, but rolls a 3, so no damage is done to the plasma gun. Second activation for the Orks, and it's the war boss. He chooses to fire at the plasma gun. However, he rolls a 1 and misses. Second activation for the Ultramarines, and it's this assault unit, choosing to assault the war boss, so moves into this location and does suppressing fire on the Ork warboss. This is the result of the dice roll, which means he doesn't put a suppression marker on the Ork warboss. Next, he moves into close assault. The Ultramarines have 5 in assault. The warboss has 6. The Orks also play burst into action, but for the +1 bonus, bringing them 7 for their assault total. And this is the result of the dice roll, which means it's a victory for the Ork warboss, which pushes back this assault unit. The Ork warboss has this piercing capability, so the assault unit cannot attempt a saving throw. Third activation for the Orks is this sluggers unit. It's choosing to engage Sergeant Vorlanus in close assault. So the sluggers have an assault of 4. Sergeant Vorlanus has an assault of 3 plus the terrain bonus, meaning it's even. This is the result of the dice roll, which means it's a victory for the Orks. So Sergeant Vorlanus is pushed back into this location. Third activation for the Ultramarines, Sergeant Ixion, choosing to assault the warboss, first moving into this location and firing on the move. This is the result of the dice roll. So Sergeant Ixion fails to wound the Ork warboss. He then moves into close assault. Sergeant Ixion has 4 in the assault, and the Ork warboss has 6. This is the result of the dice roll. So that's a victory for Sergeant Ixion, which means the Ork warboss is pushed back. The Ork warboss still has his custom force field saving throw, but he rolls a 3, and so he is damaged. Next, the Ultramarines play Blessed by the Emperor to reactivate a unit that has just activated. They reactivate Sergeant Ixion, who does fire on the move again at the Ork warboss, but again he misses. Next, he moves into close assault. This is an all-important role for the Ultramarines. Can they finish off the Ork warboss? This is the result of the dice roll, which means it is a draw. And Sergeant Ixion returns back to this square. Final activation of the game, and it's Sergeant Vorlanus. He's choosing to engage the warboss in close assault. So first, from this position, he fires on the move at the Orc war boss. He needs a 6, but he gets a 2. Next, he engages the Orc war boss in close assault. The Orc war boss has 6, and Sergeant Vorlanus only 3, so he'll need lucky dice to win this game. This is the result of the dice roll, and it's not enough. Sergeant Vorlanus is destroyed. So this is the way the battle ends, as a victory for the Orcs. Some excellent card play by the Orcs, bringing the war boss back to full health, removing his suppression marker, and being able to sneak him behind the battle wagon made the task for the Ultramarines that much more difficult. But it still came down to the final dice rolls, and so it really could have gone either way. So although officially this is the end of the campaign, I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to carry on and show you what happens in the remaining scenarios. I hope you enjoyed this nail-biting finish. I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.